Hello, hello, hello. So today I'm going to go over some of my application material from when I applied to AFI. I'm making this video because I remember when I was applying, I watched YouTuber Linda Boss's video going over her application material for getting into the USC screenwriting program, and it was so helpful. Like, it gave me all of the confidence that I needed to apply. So I was accepted into American Film Institute and also UK's Met Film School program. I also had all of my stuff ready for USC, but didn't end up applying because of it was COVID times and there was a lot of chaos. So I'm gonna keep things just pretty casual for this one, and I might break this video into two depending on how long I ramble for. Let's look at the narrative statement / personal statement. So just to clarify, I applied and attended American Film Institute's Screenwriting MFA program. I was the graduating class of 2023, which means I applied year of 2021. It was like peak COVID time. Apparently that year was the most intensive year for applicant numbers because everyone was like, society has stopped societying, let's all go back to school. So I can only talk about my application experience for then. I checked online and looked at this year's application requirements for 2026, and they've newly included a minute-long video, which they didn't used to have for the screenwriting program. I know that they did have for the directing program and other programs as well, but the application video, that's kind of like a standard thing as well. A lot of film schools have that. I have workshop students who have also had to make that, and I have peers who also have had to make that, so I can definitely like gather more information, talk about an application video at some point as well. Also, I'm sorry if I keep looking down, my laptop is here and I'm like reading off the material, so hopefully that's not too distracting. So I am just reading off AFI's website here for their sort of requirements for the narrative statement, and it mentions it should be no longer than 3 pages in length, and it should be about the following things, which is the applicant's personal story, their discipline of interest, their collaboration experience, and their long-term goals. There's a big chunk on applicant personal story, which I'll just kind of like read off here. The majority of the narrative statement should convey an applicant's unique story and what shaped them as a person. Applicants should consider sharing what kind of story they want to tell, why those stories are important to them, and how their life experience has informed these story choices. In general, the admissions committee wants to get to know the applicants outside of their resume and professional accomplishments. So I would say that this is the most important bullet point. I mean, they went into full detail about sort of what they're looking for. They do not want your narrative statement to be a resume, like a list of your work. I know they do mention talking about collaborative experience, and I don't think I did that in mine, but maybe the requirement also had been updated since then. Regardless, I know the rubric for the admissions committee kind of looking at these types of things, and it's much more about getting a sense of the applicant's personality and what type of film that they would like to make. So I would say if you don't have a lot of filmmaking experience and you're going to film school sort of like freshly from a different discipline or background, I really wouldn't worry too much about trying to come up with some sort of collaborative experience or anything else. So I'll just talk a little bit about, my narrative statement and sort of like what I focused on. At the time that I realized I wanted to be a screenwriter, a big part of the reason was this like discovery of self-identity that I had been grappling with for a very long time. I luckily had a very clear story of how I ended up wanting to be a screenwriter, and a big part of that is I had spent a lot of my life writing stories that felt literary, which often ended up being about English, white, British people. And I was obviously going through also a lot of self-discovery at that time, and I realized that, oh my God, like I hadn't been writing about myself my entire life, and a big part of that is because I didn't see a lot of representation for people like me on screen. So when I started writing about stories that were honest to my life experiences, I started to see lots of people from different backgrounds resonating it in all sorts of different ways. And I was honestly surprised. I was like, oh, I thought that, being more specific to me would actually make it less general to the public, to the audience, and I found the total opposite. So my narrative statement focused a lot on that. I strongly believed, and I still do believe, that art is very important, and particularly for marginalized communities to be able to see themselves on screen. So a lot of my application focus was about that. The other thing is that AFI has it on their website as part of their conservatory ethos. American Film Institute believes in the power of diverse voices to drive culture forward. We strive to cultivate and sustain an inclusive environment at AFI that actively affirms and is respectful of the identities of all people across genders, abilities, and ethnicities, sexual orientation, socioeconomic backgrounds, and ideological perspectives. I think that really, in a lot of ways, was true about AFI. I feel like in my cohort, there were really such a large group of diverse perspectives. There were people from, many different countries, international, domestic, but also, people from very different socioeconomic backgrounds. Obviously, going to film school requires a certain level of finances. I know that it is not perfect by any means, but I definitely noticed that about AFI. So I'm not saying to play the diversity card or anything like that, but I'm definitely saying to lean into your uniqueness, your perspective that makes you special. Kind of don't be afraid that it will be too unconventional to get in. If anything, it'll probably help your case. Okay, so now let's get into my personal statement. I won't go through the whole thing, but just certain aspects that I think are important to note and sort of to give you an example. So to begin, a great tip to note is your first sentence and your first paragraph in your personal statement, arguably the most important. Because if you're picturing like an admissions person who's like read about 200 personal statements at this point and is sort of like losing their mind slowly, getting a first sentence that immediately catches your attention is so important and just makes you go, oh, thank God, like give me something interesting to look at. So I started my personal statement with, did you know I have two names? My English name is April, quirky, fun, easy to spell, easy to remember. My Chinese name is Yixiao, the opposite of all those things. Growing up, I hid away my Chinese name like a dirty secret, refusing to tell people when they asked. One time when I was 11, a classmate paid me 50 pence to know my name. That was almost the only time I relented. 50p was a lot back then. As expected though, she immediately forgot. But you see, I was born as Yixiao. Each character was hand-selected by my mother and father respectively, intertwined with their hopes for my future. Yi means one, wholeness, my mother's reminder to be the best of what I can be. Xiao translates to natural and unrestrained, elegant and unconventional. My father's wish for me to be untethered by burdens, free to pursue my dreams. They did not gift me this name to be mispronounced, mocked, and shamefully hidden away. That was my opening paragraph. My opening sentence is a question. Immediately, it feels like you're talking directly to the reader. I'm not saying you have to open with a question or anything like that, just like something really punchy and different. I remember when I was thinking about how to write my personal statement, I was kind of just thinking like, okay, I have to talk about me, like what makes me me? And I just thought, well, hi, my name is April. And then I went, actually, it's a little bit more complicated than that. Like, yeah, my name is April, but also I have this other name. And then I just thought about like what that meant to me, and I was like, yeah, okay, that's a good opening hook. So also what you might notice is that I have a very strong sense of voice in this intro. I'm cracking jokes at the reader. I'm not just saying, ever since I was young I wanted to be a filmmaker. I'm very much being like, hey, this is how I write. As you will see in my application samples, there's gonna be some comedy elements in that. This is like part of who I am and part of how I tell my stories. Narrative statement, if you can sort of tie it into the genre of your portfolio piece, would be really beneficial. Obviously, it doesn't have to be that at all. I know people are like discovering themselves and you can explore all sorts of different genres. It's just like a more coherent picture that you paint of yourself on paper, the better your chances are for an admissions person to look at you and be like, oh, this is what this type of person is. The other thing to mention is, like I said, a big part of my reason for doing film, which is what they want to know. They're like, why do you want to be a filmmaker? Is a sense of identity, a sense of self-discovery, but also specifically pertaining to my Chinese identity and my Asian identity. And I want to be a filmmaker essentially because I want to tell Chinese stories and bring Asian, British, Asian American, diaspora Asian stories to the big screen. That was like a big part of what I was championing. And this intro kind of encompassed all of that while also introducing myself, while also giving you a sense of my voice. So in the next paragraph, I talked a little bit about my personal background, how I grew up, and what filmmaking means to me, sort of my own identity struggles. So one of the lines in my personal statement is that I am a mosaic of my fragments, a collector of perspectives, and most importantly, I am a storyteller. And when I finally realized this, it was as if all the broken pieces fell into place and I became whole again. My life's purpose is to climb into the minds of others, think as them, and breathe as them, so I can tell the world their story. It's a bit artsy and poetic and all that. Basically, I'm saying this is my background. All of these things happened, and it made me realize, okay, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a storyteller. The next paragraph, I went into more detail specifically about my relationship to writing and what type of stories I write. So I talked about this short story that I wrote when I was young, that was published onto my school laureate's website, and it was supposed to be about my Chinese grandfather, but only years later did I realize, actually I whitewashed him into a English soldier dying in the Second World War. And I was like, that's actually not my grandfather at all. I wonder what happened there. So I talk a little bit about breaking that dam and discovering my own voice and the type of stories that I want to tell, and basically writing stories that were true to my own experiences and identity rather than trying to appeal to what I think a story should look like or sound like. So the next paragraph, I go a little bit more into that. I talk about the type of stories that are important to me. A line in here is stories that told the world I am different but just as real as you are. Honestly, my narrative statement was not very long. They said it has to be 3 pages. Mine was just 2 pages. I was very punchy with it. I've read other people from my cohort's narrative statements that were like definitely longer than this. But then final paragraph, the conclusion, this is also important. I would say the intro and the conclusion are 2 of your most important paragraphs in your narrative statement. And the conclusion, I think, is a lot easier to write than an intro, but the conclusion sort of has to tie everything together and most importantly say why. Okay, so now I've told you all of these things about me and myself as a creative and why I want to do this. This is why I want to be at your institution, and this is why your institution is the specific one that I am made for. So blah, 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 blah. That is why I am applying to AFI. It is an institution that sees not only the beauty, but the power of cinema, that its purpose is to open a window into someone else's life so we can think as them and breathe as them. And you can kind of look at each institution, like each film school will have sort of their different ethos that they push forward. I know I tailored this one a little bit for Met Film. Met Film, I don't quite remember now, but I think at the time talked a little bit more about like practical. They had a more like pragmatic approach. AFI is very like, tour, find your voice, blah, blah, blah. A Met Film was much more like practical industry education that will get you, professionally ready to like face the real world. So for Met Film School, I tailored the ending a little bit, still with the same. That is why I'm applying to Met Film School. It is an institution that values diversity, inclusion, and nurturing unique voices. I think they maybe mentioned that on their website. I believe its practical industry approach to teaching will best prepare me for the struggles and triumphs of screenwriting so that I can fully reach my potential as a storyteller. So that's kind of what I adjusted a little bit. Back to my AFI personal statement. So that section where they talk about long-term goals, I never like went into big and grand long-term goals. Like first I want to make my feature film by the time I'm 25 and then I want to win an Oscar. Like I didn't do anything like that. So I talked a lot about like shaping the world with cinema and allowing people to see themselves in films and how important that is and how much cultural change that could bring. So I kind of said I want to change the world for those individuals one film at a time, and AFI is the place for me to do it. And that's pretty much how I address my long-term goals. Like I didn't lay out a step-by-step plan or anything like that. So that is it from me today. Again, I offer one-on-one consulting sessions for potential students who are looking to workshop their personal statements or application portfolio. Whether you're looking to apply to AFI, another film school, or any grad school for that matter, feel free to check out my website linked in the description below and also on the screen before you. Happy applying, and I will see you next time.